Hey everyone, and welcome back to Twisted Talks. I'm Josh.
I'm Tanya.
So this week it is Tanya's week to cover a case, and she is covering something beginning with D family murders.
The Dardeen family murders.
Dardeen, there we go.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Now, here's the reins. Please take them.
I have them.
Thank you.
On horsey. So, just before I get into the case, I want to first of all say that this case this episode might be a little bit shorter than what you're used to, due to slight lack of information. But as well, I want to give a trigger warning that this case does involve children, and obviously the standard trigger warning for murder and things like that, and also mutilation. Lovely. So yeah, buckle up or fuck off. Yeah, I said what I said. Today's case takes place in the small town of Ina in southern Illinois in 1987. Now, Ina was quite a simple town. It had a shop, a gas station, a firehouse, a post office, and a bank, and not much else at this time.
Basic little town, so.
Basically Kildare. Kildare doesn't have a bank, actually. And this was where the Dardeen family had chosen to live. Now, the family consisted of 28-year-old Keith Dardeen and his wife Elaine Dardeen, who was 30.
So they're quite a young family.
Yeah. They had a 2-year-old son named Peter, and Elaine was also 7.5 months pregnant.
Aww.
The couple had chosen the names Ian and Casey as they were unsure if they were having a boy or a girl.
Okay.
Now, I couldn't find much information on Keith and Elaine, but this is what I was able to find. So Keith was born on June 22nd, 1958 in Mount Carmel, Wabash, Illinois.
That's a mouthful,
Wabash.
That second one. Wabash. It sounds like, like a cleaning product.
Yeah. And I forgot
Washing machines live longer with Wabash.
Wabash. And I forgot to mention, Keith was actually born as Russell Keith Dardeen. And his mother was Joanne Dardeen, and I believe his father was also named Russell.
It's a tradition.
Yes. Now, Elaine was born Ruby Elaine Cowling in Fairfield, Wayne County, Illinois on August 10th. That's the day after my birthday, 1957, which is 40 years before I was born, to Lee and Inez Cowling, and she had 2 brothers and a sister. Now, Keith and Elaine married in August 1979, and the couple both went by their middle names, so I will just be referring to them as Keith and Elaine, not Russell and Ruby.
Yeah.
Now, the family lived in a beige and white mobile home nestled into the woodland beside Route 37.
Photos will be attached.
Just outside of Ina. Now, they owned the mobile home, but they were renting the land from a nearby farming couple.
To the Instagram, by the way, not to the podcast.
Yeah,
description.
I'm just going to hold the pictures up so you guys can listen.
Listen to the image!
Listen to the image. So, Keith had bought the mobile home after finishing his training as a treatment plant operator, and after this, he worked as a treatment plant operator in Rend Lake Water Conservancy District. Elaine worked in an office supply store in Mount Vernon, and in their free time the couple were very involved in their Baptist church, where they were part of a musical ensemble.
Same difference, I think.
So Keith would sing, and I believe Elaine would play the piano. Sorry, just cleaning my glasses. And
it's actually quite funny. It's like a couple you'd see in like an old-fashioned TV show, like that one of them sang at church and the other played the piano at church, and they fell in love.
Like
and,
like if Peter Griffin sang at church, because I think Lois Griffin played the piano at church at one point in the Family Guy. I can't talk.
In the Guy of Families.
Just disregard everything I just said, except about the case.
Yeah, please don't forget that.
Now, so the Dardeen family had been living in Ina for about 2 years at this point, so okay. I'm assuming that they moved there around the time of Peter's birth or while Elaine was pregnant.
Yeah.
Or possibly after his birth. Now, they actually didn't feel safe living there because it was in, I want to say Jefferson County, but I could be wrong. I forgot to write that down and I'm really bad at geography. So basically in the general area of where they were living, it had become a very violent place to live. And there was about 10 to 15 murders that had taken place in the previous 2 years.
Is it really bad though? Because it's America. I was expecting the number to be higher for 2 years.
Honestly, same, but It was the 80s, 70s,
Like,
80s.
last I checked the other day, there's already been 80 mass shootings in America since 2023 began.
I will say I do feel like, I know America is quite well known in terms of serial killers and murders and things, but I feel like in the last like 20 years, 20, 30 years, it's just become chaos.
But then again, in terms of like shootings and serial killers and whatnot, I do wonder, because we do have to take into consideration, I suppose, that America is huge.
Humongous.
So I'm like, if you added up like the equivalent amount of countries in Europe together, that
It
would make
probably
up the
would,
same
yeah.
size as America.
Like,
What
it
would
is-
the difference be?
Yeah, it is just that America is fucking humongous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. At the American government, please implement gun control. I'm sick of hearing about kids dying at school.
Yeah.
And also, it's just wild to me that, like, so we'll say here, I work with children. I work in what would be kindergarten age, I suppose. And we do, like, fire safety and, like, fire drills. They do shooting drills.
Yeah.
Like, it's the mental image of young children and toddlers and, like, even teenagers learning how to protect themselves from being shot at school
Yeah, it's crazy.
is insane. Like, so I can't remember what exactly happened, but something happened at a school here in Ireland years ago. I don't think it was anything insane. It wasn't a shooting.
Pretty sure there was a shooting in an Irish school.
There
before.
was in
Long time ago, and only once that I know
yeah,
of.
it was not Balbriggan. Was it Balbriggan? No, it wasn't Balbriggan.
I can't remember.
I'll look it up at the end of the episode. But basically, because of whatever it was that happened, I know my primary school, my middle school, I suppose, if you're American, would have, like, they implemented safety precautions in terms of, like, all the doors were locked with, like, a code and only teachers had access to the code. Even parents, if they were coming to the school, had to be buzzed into the building.
Oh, like in from the main doors?
Yeah, and
yeah.
you had to sign in and sign out. And, like,
I feel like, could that have been kidnap related?
I think so. I think it was someone was taken from a school. Now, I'm pretty sure they found the child. They found the child. And
It was located.
It was located. So they found the child. And
It had GPS tracking turned on.
Like, I was really young at the time. Like I said, I was in, like, I don't know, second or third class. I was 7 or 8. And I think it was a case of, like, parental kidnapping. But yeah, like, even I've been working in childcare for 5 years now, I think. 4 or 5 years now.
So?
And I have never worked in a place that didn't have a code for the front door that only the staff had access to. And, like, the play areas and everything were, like, not accessible from the street or by strangers.
Which should be standard.
Yeah,
now.
like, it's to keep the children safe and to keep us safe.
Yeah.
But yeah, you best believe if someone comes in where I work with a gun, I'm going demented.
In other words, you're going to be the first.
Don't you touch the children! So, as I said, 10 to 15 murders had taken place in the previous 2 years in the area. And this led to Keith becoming very protective of his family. On one occasion, a young woman had come to the trailer and she had asked to use the phone. I think she had a flat tire or something, or her car had broke down or something. And he just point blank refused to let her in because he was obviously rightly more concerned with his family's safety, as he should be. Now, on November 18th, 1987, Keith didn't show up for work at the Rend Lake Water Conservancy District. Now, this was extremely out of character for Keith, who was described as a reliable worker. He had not called in sick, he had not contacted anyone, and phone calls to his house received no answer. So his supervisor called his parents, who I assume would have been his next of kin aside from his wife.
Yeah.
But neither of them had heard from him. And his parents were immediately concerned, so they called the sheriff's office in Ina, and they then travelled to Ina with the spare keys that they had for the home to meet the deputies.
Oh, dear God.
Now, when deputies entered the house, they discovered a truly horrific sight. So Elaine was found tucked into bed with her 2-year-old son Peter. Elaine had been bound with duct tape and gagged, and they had both been brutally beaten with a baseball bat that Keith had gotten for Peter. They both had fractures to their skulls, amongst other injuries. And even worse, the beating had sent Elaine into labour. And when she delivered her baby girl, the killer also beat the baby to death.
That's a whole nother level of evil.
Like, this is a newborn. Like,
Yeah.
the 2-year-old was despicable enough. A newborn. Like, the child barely had breath in her lungs before she was beaten to death with a fucking baseball bat. So the child, the little girl, who was later named Casey Elaine Dardeen, was found tucked into bed with her mother and her brother. It appeared to the deputies that the killer had not been in any hurry to leave the scene, as it appeared they had cleaned up the scene before leaving. Now, I saw in some sources that the scene was spotless, and I saw in other sources that it was like a hasty clean-up job.
But some cleaning effort had been made anyway.
Yes. So the initial theory was that Keith Dardeen had viciously murdered his family, but this was quickly put aside when the next day he was found lying dead in a field about a mile away. He had been shot 3 times, and the killer had cut off his penis. So
That's a very
that's rage, like, to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder, did he have like a mistress?
I will touch on that later. So Keith's 1981 Plymouth was found parked outside a police station in Benton, which was 11 miles from the mobile home. The inside of the car was spattered with blood, suggesting Keith had been killed in it, or this was where his genitals had been mutilated. Now, obviously, the horrific murder sent the town of Ina into a state of shock and fear. And as I mentioned earlier, this wasn't the first murder to happen in the area, with the most recent case being a teenager in Mount Vernon who had killed his parents and 3 siblings as they were coming home. So, like, he would, as someone would go into the house, he was killing them. Now, with the lack of evidence and motive, the people of the town were terrified that the killer could still be in the town, that he was living among them.
They were concerned it could have been anyone.
It could have been anyone they knew. So
and
people,
going by the fury in that killing,
yeah, like that.
It sounds like it could have been someone local that was known.
So people were beginning to arm themselves. Gun sales skyrocketed apparently around this time, and the
solution to everything.
Guns, cause America. Sorry, that's a generalization.
It's not exactly a wrong one, though.
So the Franklin County coroner remarked that if he ran out of gas on a country road, he wouldn't even bother knocking on doors for help because the locals were so scared to let strangers into their homes. He said he would honestly be better off walking to the highway to hitchhike. Like, that's how scared people were. Like, obviously you're going to take precautions, you're not going to let strangers into your home anyway, but still, like, they were not taking a single fucking chance.
Yeah.
And I think especially with the fact that people kind of knew that Keith was already taking precautions, and like, he didn't let that girl in to use the phone that time, so they must have been fucking petrified, because this is a man that was being careful and he was doing his utmost to protect his family and keep them safe. Now, the case involved 30 detectives dedicated full-time, and they interviewed more than 100 people, but they were unable to find a suspect or any sort of motive for the murder. There had been no evidence of forced entry to the home, and there was a VCR, which, if you're too young, is a video player. You know, DVDs weren't always a thing. Netflix wasn't always a thing. Back in the day, we had to use videotapes.
You're making us sound a lot older than I'd like you to make us sound.
Girl, I remember videotapes.
So do I.
They were so fun. Fun fact, right? So, when I was living in Ardwillan, I was like, I want to say 5 or 6.
Give or take.
I was young, and obviously I loved Harry Potter. So I had Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone on video, and I remember I had been watching it and I fell asleep watching it, and then I know there was some drama. I grew up in a council estate. There was always drama, but there was some drama. I don't know, it was something set on fire or something. So naturally we all like went outside to see what the fuck was going on. So like I woke up and I was like, what the fuck's going on? I was like, what's going on? I didn't say what the fuck was going on because I was like fucking 5, but I was like, oh, what's going on? And like I specifically remember, like, I had this wicker basket in my room, which is where like Mum would keep my shoes, and I went and I put on 2 mismatched shoes. I'm pretty sure one of them was my mother's, and toddled downstairs to find out what the fuck's going on. And then when I went back upstairs, I wanted to rewatch the video, and the video just wasn't in the video player anymore. And like to this day, I don't know what happened to it. Like my parents didn't take it out, my brothers didn't take it out. It just, it glitched in the matrix. Gone.
It was used to start the fire.
Probably. Fucking can't have anything nice. So as I said, there was a VCR and a camera in plain sight, as well as cash and jewellery easily accessible in one of the rooms, ruling out robbery. And now, while Keith had been sexually mutilated, investigators ruled out a sexual motive. There were no signs of an affair on either Keith or Elaine's part, which ruled out jealousy as a motive. There was no evidence of debts or grudges. A stack of papers with sports scores was found in the house, leading police to wonder if Keith may have had gambling debts. But his mother, Joanne Dardeen, told police that her son was so frugal, he actually was financing his son's college fund by reselling 50-cent cans of soda at work.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Dead right. Make a profit.
Yeah.
Police did find a small amount of weed in the house, but never found conclusive evidence to say Keith and Elaine could have been dealing drugs. Joanne suggested the weed could have belonged to the killer, as it wasn't something that she had ever known Keith or Elaine to partake in. She later said that maybe someone had been trying to sell drugs to Keith and he had refused, which led to the murders, or that perhaps someone had like fancied Elaine or liked Elaine and had become enraged when she refused their advances. Some did believe that the brutal nature of the murders could only be the work of a cult trying to appease the devil.
Yeah, because of course.
Yeah. But there were no occult symbols or ritualistic materials ever recovered from the trailer, and nothing about the murders, to me,
seemed ritualistic or culty.
Or like anything like that. But police did believe that the family had not been chosen at random due to the level of violence involved. Like, they believed that it was very personal and very deliberate, and I would be inclined to agree.
I mean, I would be inclined to agree with that, but also at the end of the day, if someone's not crazy,
if
but like deranged enough, unhinged, psycho, you know, they're going to let all their rage out.
Now, I saw in one source that apparently Keith had been killed 12 hours before Elaine and the kids.
Okay.
Don't know how.
Pinch of salt with that
pinch of salt. Don't know how true that is, because then another source said that the coroner wasn't able to determine a time of death.
Exact time of death, like.
Now, as time passed, the case began to grow colder and colder. Joanne did her best, Keith's mother, to apply pressure to the police to solve the murders. She created a petition to get the Oprah Winfrey Show to cover the case, but despite her gathering over 3,000 signatures, the producers declined, saying that the case was too graphic for daytime television.
That's fair.
Now, America's Most Wanted said the same thing, but they did end up covering the case in 1998. But unfortunately, it turned up no new leads, no new information. Yeah. It didn't really...
Fruitless.
Yeah, it was a fruitless effort. Now, so the case had no new leads at all until either 1999 or 2000.
And when did it take place again?
1987.
So like 12, 13 years later.
Yeah, like that's fucking insane to me. But it is so common, I suppose.
Yeah, especially in relatively older cases.
Yeah, so it was in either 1999 or 2000 when serial killer Tommy Lynn Sells was arrested. Now, just to give some background information on Sells, and I will say I was able to find a bit more background information on him, and I think it's just because he was a convicted serial killer. So, Tommy was born in Oakland, California on June 28th. I couldn't find the year. And he was a twin. He had a twin sister named Tammy Jean. Oh. Tommy and Tammy.
Original.
Very nice. Now, his mother, Nina, was a single mother who had 3 kids before giving birth to Tommy and Tammy Jean. The twins...
One of them Timmy?
Probably Tibby, and Tanya.
Jemima.
Tanae. So, at 18 months old, Tommy and Tammy Jean both ended up contracting spinal meningitis.
Oh, God.
And unfortunately, Tammy Jean didn't survive this. Now, after he had recovered, Tommy was sent to live with his aunt Bonnie Walpole until he was around 5 years old, and this was the reason he was brought back to his mother was because his mother had learned that Bonnie wanted to adopt him. So she was like, no, he's my child, I'm taking him.
Yeah, like, why did she even send him away?
I don't know. I'm assuming it's because she was a single mother. She had 5 kids and then one of them passed away, and maybe she was struggling and she needed the help and the support. But I don't know. I couldn't find any reasoning online.
Yeah, like, you think you'd keep the one that nearly just died?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe taking care of him was too much for her or something. So throughout his early childhood, Sells was often left to fend for himself and was drinking alcohol by the age of 7, as you do. This is also when he began spending time with a man from a nearby town who showered him in attention and gifts and took him on outings, and I'm sure
that
we
is
can
grooming.
all see where we could all see where it's going. So that was at the age of 7, and when Sells was 8, the man began to molest him, and this man was...
This is making a lot of sense about
This man was later arrested, tried and convicted for child molestation.
Good.
Now I couldn't find out anything about who the man was, but just a bit of background information. From the age of 10 to 13, Sells was in trouble all the time. He had left school and was drinking and smoking weed constantly. At one point, he climbed into his grandmother's bed with no clothes on. And his mother, who had by now had enough, said, you know what now? Packed up the other kids and left him behind without so much as a forwarding address.
Okay.
So, yeah. I mean, she could have got him help of some kind.
Back then, though?
Yeah, okay, fair point. Yeah, fair point, actually. Yeah, because that would have been... I think he was 22 in 1987. So... 1987... He would have been born in 1965, and at the age of 13 it would have been 1978, so yeah, to be fair. Now, the fact that his mother had abandoned him like that triggered such a rage in Tommy that he committed his first attack during these teenage years by pistol whipping a girl until she was unconscious.
He was pistol whipping, just beating someone with a pistol, not actually...
with the butt of a gun, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
He began drifting from town to town. He picked up odd jobs and he was stealing to support himself. He claims to have committed his first murder at 16 years old when he broke into a house and caught a man performing oral sex on a young boy, but there is no proof of this claim. In May 1981, he moved back in with his family, but this was very short-lived because his mother soon kicked him out after he tried to have sex with her while she was in the shower.
That's
Oedipus. That's an Oedipus complex.
That's something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, Sells was given...
That's disgusting.
Yeah, like his mother... And he climbed into his nana's bed, butt naked.
I feel ill.
Yeah, same. Might be the coffee and the fact that I'm hungry, though. So Sells was given a 2-year prison sentence in May 1984 for car theft, but he was released the following February. He admitted to killing 35-year-old Ina Court, I think is how it's said, and her 4-year-old son in Missouri after she had apparently invited him to her home. He said he had caught her going through his backpack and then beaten her to death with a baseball bat.
Okay.
Before turning on her young son, who was, in his eyes, a witness. He was 4. And I would just like to point out the similarities between that murder and the Dardeen family murder.
Yeah, and obviously with his history of how he was molested, then chopping the penis off of...
Yeah. So, all in all, Sells is officially linked to 22 murders, though he claims the number is around 70. He was eventually apprehended after he murdered 13-year-old Kayleen Harris, who was known as Katie, and attempted to murder her 10-year-old friend Crystal Searles while they were having a sleepover at Katie's home in Del Rio, Texas. And I did read that basically he had somehow gotten into the house, he had killed Katie, and Crystal was the little girl who survived. She was asleep on the top bunk, and she woke up, and she said she looked down and she said she just remembers the terrified eyes of her best friend, and then he slit Katie's throat and he went to leave the room. And as he was leaving the room, he looked back and he saw Crystal.
Yeah.
And then he cut her throat too, but
not deep enough.
She survived. She said she played dead, and then she ran for help. Which is like, she was 10. That's fucking terrifying. So he received the death penalty in 2000 for this. He was also convicted of murdering 13-year-old Stephanie Mahaney in 1997, and in 2003 he was given a life sentence for that. And he had also previously served time in jail for raping and stabbing a 19-year-old woman in 1992. So I just kind of included those bits to kind of give a sense of
who he was as a person. He seems to be the main source.
Yeah. Sells claimed that he was the one responsible for the murder of the Dardeen family. As he tells it, he met Keith at a truck stop, though he would sometimes say it was a pool hall, or that Keith had picked him up as he was hitchhiking and had invited him home for dinner.
Doesn't sound like.
For a hot meal. Sells then said that after dinner, Keith had propositioned him, asking him for a 3-way with Elaine. Bear in mind she was 7.5 months pregnant. And this caused Sells to become enraged. He claimed to have raped Elaine, with one source saying he did so with the baseball bat. Now, while Sells was able to give some details with accuracy, these seem to be details that he could have learned from the media and newspapers.
Yeah, because a lot of what he's saying doesn't seem likely.
Yeah.
In terms of how he got into the house
exactly.
or anything like that.
Yeah. And when he was asked about details that wouldn't have been known to the public, like how Elaine's body was positioned, he first answered incorrectly before blurting out the correct answer, leaving detectives questioning whether he had just guessed it.
Yeah.
Now, other doubts about Sells' story arise from the fact that the Dardeens felt unsafe in the area, and with Keith being so protective of his family, his mother and people who knew him, and I would agree, were sure that he would never invite a stranger into the house.
Yeah.
His mother referenced the fact that he had turned away the young woman who wanted to use the phone, saying that if he didn't let her in,
why would he let this grown-ass man in?
Would not invite a 22-year-old man that he didn't know, particularly someone who is, like, living his life by... So the way that Sells got around was the railway.
Yeah.
He was a transient. He would use the railway to get around to towns and pick up odd jobs. So, not to stereotype, but I would imagine, like, especially with it being the 80s, he wouldn't really have had access to, like, grooming equipment, we'll say, and showers and things like that. So he probably would have looked quite unkempt.
Possibly.
I don't know, did I see that in a source, or is that just me being judgmental? Well, it's not me being judgmental.
Well, it's just the fact it's like until you get from place to place.
Yeah, like
it's you know, like he could have looked fine because he could have not long groomed himself at the last place he was at.
True.
But he also could have not had the chance yet.
Yeah, so
and
he
could
either
not have looked.
He either would have seemed okay or he would have looked rough. But either way, I don't see Keith inviting him into the house, let alone inviting him into a 3-way with his 7.5-month pregnant wife while their 2-year-old son was in the house.
Wait, what? He tried to say that Keith propositioned it?
Yeah, so he tried to say that they had dinner, that Keith invited him to the house, they had dinner, and then Keith asked him, would he have a 3-way with him and Elaine? So, like, Elaine, Keith, and Tommy Sells. And I'm just like, it's not adding up for me. It is not adding up for me.
Computer says no.
Computer says no. Now, Sells himself said in 2010, quote, I know people got their doubts. They say there's no physical evidence tying me to the Dardeens, but there wasn't any for any of them because they wasn't looking for me. I moved. I was always a transient. Tommy Lynn Sells was put to death in 2014, and as there was no physical evidence ever recovered and no viable leads, it is highly unlikely that we will ever know if he truly was responsible for the horrendous murder of the Dardeen family, or if he was simply trying to take advantage of the justice system to buy himself more time before his inevitable death. Because as we said in the Bundy case, a lot of killers, specifically serial killers, when the death penalty is on the table, they will confess to crimes that they haven't committed in an attempt to buy themselves more time and get a stay of execution.
Yeah, or even will admit to stuff that they have actually committed, but will lead to evidence or a body to prove it.
Yeah. Now, one thing I forgot to include was that apparently Sells had made claims that he could lead police to evidence of some sort, but because he was imprisoned in Texas, Texas officials refused to let him travel to Illinois to showcase this supposed evidence. But I personally don't believe he was responsible.
Yeah, like the only thing at any point that had me, okay, he liked his weed, there was weed at the scene.
Yeah,
and the fact that he was molested as a child, and then out of anger he could have
the fact that he was
mutilated down below.
And then as well, the similarities between the murder of Ina Court and her son and the murder of the Dardeens, but at the same time...
But what he's saying in terms of claiming he did it isn't adding up.
Yeah, like the math ain't mathin'.
Unless it's a case of he mixed, up with a different crime he committed, like he did the two of them and mixed what he was saying up with a different thing he did that hadn't been caught.
Yeah. But
based on all of it, I don't know.
He is the only suspect that I could find for this case. Like there seems to have been no leads, no evidence, nothing. And then I did look up like conspiracy theories. There was one that I hadn't already debunked myself through my research.
Yeah.
And it was basically someone saying like that maybe Keith Dardeen wasn't actually the father of his children, and maybe Elaine had been having an affair, and that like the real father was just really angry and took it out on the family and murdered them all.
And then she was finally pregnant with a child of Keith's.
Yeah, maybe Peter wasn't Keith's son and that's why he killed the baby. But then I'm like, I feel like maybe, now obviously I don't know, but like, would the biological father not have taken Peter then? I suppose.
What age was Peter though again?
He was 2. Like he would have been young enough that if he had taken him, he wouldn't remember his parents. He wouldn't remember what had happened.
Unless you're just so angry that you really just don't even give a shit about a child. You don't want to have a child. You just don't want them to have a child.
Yeah, it could have just been more anger at Elaine. But I feel like a lot of I feel like the killer was more angry with Keith based on the mutilation, but then the murders of Elaine and the kids was so brutal at the same time that I'm just like, whoever it was, they were angry with the whole family. If you think about it, it's like, if the person, let's say, that was the killer was angry about like the whole family dynamic and Elaine being pregnant, how did Elaine get pregnant? From the penis that he chopped off. Yes. But also I'm just like, what kind of a human being do you have to be? What kind of a human being do you have to be to commit murder in the first place?
But the newborn.
But a newborn and a 2-year-old. Like...
It's sickening.
Yeah, like that, it honestly did turn my stomach.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm like, there's little aspects that make me think, yeah, it could have been that dude, but for the majority, I don't think it was.
Just the fact that like he got so much wrong when police were interviewing him, like suggests to me that it probably wasn't him. But at the same time, I'm like, there could be a chance.
It's possible, but it's not even like, I don't know.
Yeah, like it's a strange case.
I feel like it might have been someone else. And I feel like there's definitely more. I don't mean it in a mean way, but I feel like there has to be more to the family that people didn't know.
Yeah. And I think the fact that they weren't living directly in the town, like they were outside of the town, like in the woodland, like nestled into the woodlands, like the townspeople wouldn't have known much. And I couldn't find if Elaine's parents were still alive or if she was in contact with her parents or what the story was there. But like, I know Keith's parents lived in Mount Carmel, I think it was. No, not Mount Carmel. Something Carmel. I said it earlier.
Somewhere else anyway.
Yeah. Because they travelled down to Anna. Now, they did have spare keys to the house, but also, like, when you're not living in the house... Or
even in the town, and seeing each other all the time.
Yeah, like, you don't know the true... Like, you never know what goes on behind closed doors, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Like, the weed could have easily been theirs, and they just didn't know that they smoked weed now. Do you know?
Yeah.
Because it could have just been something they didn't know time to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Could have just been something to relax when the kid was in bed, because obviously she hadn't had the baby. Yeah, it's a hard one to decode. It doesn't seem like, from obviously resources available, it doesn't seem that like there was... It doesn't even seem like they had many friends.
No, like they had moved to
They
town.
seemed very secluded.
Yeah, and like I'm sure that's probably the lifestyle they wanted to live.
Which is fine, yeah.
But it did just kind of hinder the investigation a lot.
And obviously, of course, as well with the amount of murders in the 2 years leading up to.
Yeah, and the fact it was the 80s.
It's also just possible that it was just a randomer.
Yeah, like it literally...
It is possible that a very, very angry criminal...
It very well could have been someone like Tommy Lynn Spears. Tommy Lynn Sells. Tommy Lynn Spears.
Is that
I was
not
thinking
Britney
of Jamie
Spears'
Lynn
dad?
Spears. It's her sister. Jamie Lynn Spears. It was Jamie Lynn Spears. We've cracked it.
There we go.
But
Case
Tommy
closed.
Lynn... It could have been someone like Tommy Lynn Sells who used the railways to travel, or who, because they lived near a highway, they lived near Route 37. Could have been someone passing by that like saw the house and was like,
oh yeah,
I'm gonna commit a crime tonight.
Yeah, you really
but
can't
like
tell.
What baffles me is the fact that his car, like Keith's car, was parked outside a police station.
Yeah, that's really weird. That is really weird.
Yeah, just absolutely wild to me. And that's kind of all the information I have. Like, as I said, I knew it was going to be shorter than what we usually get for a case.
So do with that what you will. Let us know your theories.
If you know anything, tell us, please. If there's anything I missed, please tell us, because this case is going to keep me up at night. Like, it's like the Brian Schaefer disappearance and Ben Smart and Olivia Hope. Like, those do keep me up at night. I'll be in bed and I'm just like, where the fuck are they? What happened?
Yeah, who done it?
And the Sodder children.
What's going on? It is crazy. It is wild. But, yeah.
I was going to say something there.
I can just see the loading symbol above you. Oh, say something. Okay. Anyway, with that said, like Tanya said, if you hear anything, if you see anything extra that that's not been said, let us know.
Please. Thank you.
You know, give us a message on Instagram or Facebook. And don't forget to give us... Sorry, I'm yawning. And don't forget to give us 5 stars on any... on Apple Podcasts and on any, I suppose, platform that you're listening to us on, that'll allow you to give reviews and stars and whatnot, because that really helps.
And if you don't give us 5 stars...
Jamie Lynn Spears is going to come for you.
And she's going to leave your fridge open all night and your freezer open all night, and you're going to wake up in the morning and all your food's going to be defrosted and gone off, and there's going to be water all over your kitchen floor.
And your electricity bill is going to be sky high.
Yep.
Now,
there you go.
Imagine a modern day threat. But, so yeah. Thanks again for listening, guys. We love you, and stay safe, and we will wreck your ears next week.
Yes. And I can't fucking wait.
Yeah. So there.
Highlight of my week.
Exactly.
So yeah, that is the Dardeen family case and everything that Josh just said. And I hope you all have a good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and good night.
All of the above.
Bye.
Ciao.